Sugar Grove, Ohio, a place of deep gorges, jagged cliffs, and a forest canopy so thick it can swallow a scream before it ever reaches a neighbor's ear. In April 2023, 21 college students arrived at a secluded timber cabin on Sullivan Road to celebrate a 23rd birthday. It was supposed to be a weekend of isolation, cheap beer, and a bonfire that would burn until dawn. But by 2 a.m., the music was drowned out by a different sound. The sound of a blade snapping open. The sound of a man claiming he was being trampled by a mob. And the sound of a young woman, a student everyone had been teasingly calling Firefighter, suddenly finding herself on her knees in the gravel, her hands drenched in the blood of her best friend. Tonight, we go inside the investigation of Isaac Pence. We'll look at the CCTV footage that told a different story than the one he told police. We'll step inside the deplorable home he left behind, and we'll uncover the truth about the two hidden knives that turned a party into a massacre. This is a story of rage, a class war defense, and the night a celebration became a crime scene. Sugar Grove, Ohio, is the kind of place people go when they want the world to stop watching. It is a landscape of jagged cliffs, deep gorges, and a forest canopy so dense it swallows the light long before the sun actually sets. For the 21 college students winding their way up the gravel path of Sullivan Road on April 22, 2023, the isolation was the point. They were there to celebrate Dalton Flagg's 23rd birthday in a rented timber cabin that promised total privacy. There were no neighbors for miles, no police patrols, just the wind through the pines and the heavy bass of a party that was never supposed to end. By midnight, the air inside the cabin is thick with the sweet, medicinal scent of green apple schnapps and the sharp bite of Hennessy. Dalton is playing the perfect host, but the atmosphere is already beginning to sour. Among the group of laughing students is Isaac Pence. At 21, Isaac isn't a student. He's an outsider, brought along because he's dating Dalton's sister, Sabra. Isaac is a man who carries his history in his posture, a history of explosive rage and a hair-trigger temper that he's currently trying to drown in a 12-pack of Miller Lite. He didn't want to be here. He doesn't like Dalton, and he doesn't like Dalton's friends. He's here for Sabra, but as the clock ticks past 1 a.m., his presence feels less like a guest and more like a ghost at the feast. The first crack in the evening's facade happens in the kitchen. A young woman named Hannah, an EMS student with a passion for her training, is showing a group of friends photos on her phone. Fire trucks, accident scenes, the reality of the career she's building. One of the guys in the room starts calling her Firefighter. It's a playful nickname, a bit of party banter that should have been forgotten by morning. But Isaac is watching from the doorway, his vision blurred by alcohol and a mounting, irrational jealousy. He sees Sabra near the hot tub. He sees her talking to a guy named Trey. He sees the firefighter joke as a symptom of a room full of people who think they're better than him. Suddenly, the perfect weekend is gone. The laughter dies as Isaac's temper boils over. It starts as a verbal confrontation in the kitchen. Sharp words, a shoved shoulder, the sound of glass skittering across a granite counter. Dalton, seeing his birthday celebration dissolve into a brawl, moves in. He tells Isaac to get out. He tells him the party is over. He tells him to take his girlfriend and vanish into the Ohio dark. Isaac claims he's being jumped by 15 people, but the reality is simpler. 20 people just want the violence to stop before it starts. The argument spills out of the cabin and into the gravel driveway, under the cold, indifferent glow of the porch lights. The air is freezing, and the mist is rolling off the hills. Isaac is lurching toward his car, a gray SUV parked next to a Toyota 4Runner. Sabra is trailing behind him, caught in the middle of a panic attack, her world spinning between her brother and her boyfriend. Isaac is screaming, a raw, jagged sound that echoes off the trees. He reaches his car, but he doesn't reach for his keys. He doesn't put the car in gear. He reaches into the center console and pulls out a work knife. In the chaos of the driveway, 22-year-old Charles Starner, Charlie to everyone who loved him, is standing by the driver's side door. Charlie isn't looking for a fight. He's the guy who anchors the group, the one who tries to smooth the edges. He's standing there, likely trying to push the car door shut, trying to force the night to a close so everyone can go back inside to the warmth of the fire. He has no idea that the man inside the car has stopped being a guest and has become a predator. The violence is clinical in its speed. Isaac doesn't swing wildly. He doesn't poke at the crowd to clear a path. He lunges from the seat of the car with the precision of a man who knows exactly what a blade can do to a human body. 6 times. The knife finds Charlie's neck. It finds his face. It finds his back. The sound of the struggle is replaced by a scream that shears through the music still playing inside the cabin. Isaac slams the door. The engine of the SUV roars to life, and tires spin violently in the loose stone, spraying dirt and rock into the air as he peels out. He vanishes into the black labyrinth of the woods, Sabra in the passenger seat, leaving a trail of dust and a dying man in his wake. Charlie Starner is still standing for a heartbeat, his eyes wide, his hand reaching for a throat that is no longer whole. He limps toward the forerunner, his shirt turning a heavy, dark crimson before he collapses into the dirt. Hannah, the firefighter, is there in seconds. She's no longer a student. She's a first responder in a nightmare. She's on her knees in the gravel, her hands pressed hard against Charlie's neck, trying to hold his life inside his body. She's covered in him, from her fingertips to her elbows, screaming for someone to call 911. But Sullivan Road is a long way from help. As the sirens finally begin to wail in the far distance, Charlie Starner is fading, and miles away, his killer is driving through the dark, already stitching together the lies he thinks will save him. The party is over. The hunt has begun. By 3:30 a.m., the Hocking Hills woods have gone silent, but the air on Sullivan Road is heavy with the metallic tang of blood and the smell of exhaust. The music has finally been cut. The bonfire is a heap of glowing orange ribs. In the driveway, the white gravel is now a map of a massacre, illuminated by the rotating strobe of blue and red police lights. Detective Summers pulls onto the scene and finds a nightmare in stasis. 20 college students are huddled together, shivering in the pre-dawn chill, their faces pale and vacant. They are looking for a killer, but first, they have to find a witness who can still speak. 2 figures stand apart from the rest. They aren't just crying, they are painted. Hannah, the EMS student everyone was calling Firefighter just hours ago, is drenched. The blood has soaked through her sleeves, staining her skin up to the elbows. Beside her is a young man named James, Jimmy to his friends. His hoodie is a roadmap of smeared crimson. To a seasoned detective, blood tells a story before a mouth even opens. James's stains are smooth and smeared, the marks of a man who held a body, not a man who swung a blade. Hannah's arms are coated in the thick, drying evidence of a desperate, failed attempt to keep a heart beating. They are the outliers. They are the ones who stayed in the red zone while everyone else ran. Summers moves them to the back of a patrol car. The interior is cramped, smelling of upholstery and old coffee, a sharp contrast to the open-air horror of the driveway. Hannah is shaking, her voice thin and jagged. She describes the kitchen, the firefighter jokes, the way the vibe shifted from a celebration to a cage match. She tells the detective about the kid who wouldn't stop, the one who saw a harmless conversation as a declaration of war. Then she describes the moment the steel came out. Hannah didn't see a fight. She saw an execution. She watched from the porch as Isaac Pence lunged into the crowd. She describes the movement as fast and vigorous. It wasn't the clumsy flailing of a drunk. It was a focused, lethal rhythm. She watched the blade find Charlie Starner's neck. She watched the blood spray against the side of the Toyota 4Runner. She watched Isaac's arm move 6 times, a piston of rage that didn't stop until Charlie's body gave up. James adds the final, chilling detail. He was the one who tried to stop it. He tells the detective how he kicked the door of Isaac's SUV, trying to stun him, trying to break the trance of the attack. He was the one who reached into the chaos and dragged Charlie's collapsing body away from the blade. He held Charlie as Isaac's tires screamed against the gravel, the SUV fishtailing out of the driveway and vanishing into the tree line. While the detectives are processing the blood on Sullivan Road, the killer is making his first stop. Isaac Pence isn't hiding in a ditch. He's navigating the back roads of Hocking County with Sabra in the passenger seat. He's not silent. He's flipping out, but not because of what he did to Charlie. He's flipping out because of what might happen to him. Minutes after the stabbing, the gray SUV pulls into the driveway of an old friend, Justin Sloan. Isaac doesn't ask for a place to sleep. He asks for a place to hide the evidence. While Sabra stands in the garage, her hands trembling as she calls her mother, Isaac is moving. He's got 2 knives. He's panicked, his adrenaline-fueled brain searching for a way to make the steel disappear. He stashes the weapons in Justin's house, a desperate, clumsy attempt to offload the murder weapon before the heat gets too close. But the heat is already there. Back at the cabin, Dalton Flagg is talking to the police. He's the host, the brother, and now the primary source of the why. He tells Detective Summers that Isaac Pence should never have been there. He describes a man with a history of violence, a man who had been in jail just months prior for putting his hands on his own mother. Dalton explains the ultimatum he gave Isaac earlier that night. Just leave. You're belligerent. There's no reason for this. Instead of leaving, Isaac exploded. By 4:30 a.m., the investigation takes a dark turn. The police receive a tip that changes the nature of the manhunt. Isaac hasn't just fled, he's threatening to come back. Word reaches the scene that Isaac called someone from the road, claiming he was going to finish the job. The partygoers are evacuated. The cabin is locked down. The woods, once a playground, are now a tactical zone. Detective Summers realizes she isn't just looking for a man who made a mistake. She's looking for a man who is doubling down on his own darkness. As the sun begins to bleed over the horizon, the police track Sabra's phone. It pings at Isaac's house on Pickerington Road. The circle is closing. But when they arrive, they don't find a mastermind. They find a house that smells of ammonia and neglect, a place where 2 young children are living in filth while their father sleeps off a murder. The first phase is over. The evidence is gathered. The witnesses are stained. Now, the detectives just need to get the man in the room to admit what the blood has already told them. As the taillights of the gray SUV vanished into the black ink of the Hocking Hills, the clock started ticking for the Hocking County Sheriff's Office. They weren't just dealing with a stabbing. They were dealing with a known subject who had just vanished into a labyrinth of back roads. But Isaac Pence had made a critical mistake. He hadn't accounted for the digital trail he was leaving behind. While the firefighter Hannah was still kneeling in the gravel of Sullivan Road, detectives were already pinging cell phone towers. In the modern age, a getaway is only as silent as your hardware, and Isaac and Sabra's phones were screaming their location to every tower in the county. The signal wasn't heading for the state line. It was moving with frantic, jagged speed toward Pickerington. But before Isaac went home, he made a detour that would ultimately seal his fate. He pulled into the driveway of an old friend, Justin Sloan. He wasn't looking for a place to sleep. He was looking for a place to dump the weight of what he'd done. Isaac was flipping out, his adrenaline-fueled brain convinced that if he could just get the steel out of the car, he could walk away. He pulled 2 knives from the center console, the tools of the night's carnage, and stashed them inside Justin's house. He thought he was clearing his hands. In reality, he was just creating another witness. By the time Isaac pulled his SUV onto the gravel of his own driveway on Pickerington Road, the perimeter was already set. This wasn't a high-speed chase with sirens and tire spikes. It was a silent, tactical ambush. As Isaac and Sabra stepped out of the vehicle, the darkness of their front yard was suddenly shattered by the blinding white glare of tactical flashlights and the authoritative click of safeties being disengaged. The arrest was clinical. Isaac was pressed against the cold metal of his own car, the same vehicle that still held the microscopic spray of Charlie Starner's blood. But as the officers moved to clear the house, the crime expanded. They didn't find a sanctuary. They found a nightmare. Stepping into Isaac's home was like stepping into a biohazard zone. The air was a physical weight, thick, sour, and stinging, with the overwhelming scent of ammonia and raw sewage. Dog feces were smeared across the floorboards where 2 small children, a 13-month-old and a 4-month-old, were living in squalor. While Isaac had been out playing the tough guy at a birthday party, his children were breathing in the fumes of neglect. The arrest for assault and attempted murder was now joined by the immediate intervention of Child Protective Services. The scene then shifts to the sterile, air-conditioned vacuum of the interrogation room. Isaac sits across from Detective Summers, trying to project the image of a family man. He leans back, talking about his kids, Draco and Juan, as if he's their protector, completely unaware that the detectives have just seen the filth they were living in. He starts his story with a practiced calm, framing the entire night as a series of events he couldn't control. He tells the detectives he only went to the party to make Sabra happy. He describes his pride being put aside to deal with Dalton, a brother-in-law he claims has always looked down on him. He paints a picture of a perfect weekend, ruined by a crowd of college kids who thought they were better than him. But when the questions turn to the kitchen, the mask begins to slip. Isaac's version of the fight is a fantasy. He claims he was jumped by 15 guys. He says they were yanking on his car door, trying to bust the glass to get to him in Sabra. He tells the detectives he didn't want to hurt anyone. He just wanted them to back up. So he says he pulled out his work knife, a tool he uses for construction, and gave a guy a poke in the arm. Twice. Just a little nudge, he claims, to clear a path so he could escape. In Isaac's head, he is the hero. In his head, he is the victim of a mob. But the detectives have the blood-stained hoodies of Hannah and James. They have 911 calls. And most importantly, they have the truth about the pokes. They know that Charlie Starner wasn't nudged in the arm. He was hunted. He was opened up 6 times, in the neck, the face, and the back, by a man who didn't want to leave, but wanted to win. The pressure in the room shifts. The detectives stop being listeners and start being hunters. They confront Isaac with the reality of his house, the state of his children, and the fact that his work knife is currently being recovered from Justin Sloan's home. The cage Isaac tried to build with his words is falling apart, and the monster inside is finally being forced into the light. As the investigation transitioned from the blood-stained gravel of Sullivan Road to the sterile fluorescent lighting of the Hocking County courthouse, the battle lines were drawn. The prosecution had the forensic map of the crime: 6 distinct stab wounds, 2 recovered knives, and a trail of digital pings that led straight to a house of neglect. But Isaac Pence was not going to go quietly. He was doubling down on a narrative of self-defense that bordered on the cinematic. The core of the defense rested on a single evocative word: trampled. In the courtroom, Isaac's legal team painted a picture of a class war gone wrong. They framed the 21 college students not as a group of friends celebrating a birthday, but as a drunken elite mob that had cornered a working-class outsider. According to Isaac, the moment he tried to leave, the peaceful party turned into a riot. He claimed that the crowd wasn't just shouting. They were physical. They were yanking at his door, pounding on the glass of his SUV, and, most crucially, he claimed his fiancée, Sabra, was being trampled by the weight of 10 or 15 men. In Isaac's telling, the knife wasn't a weapon of choice. It was a last resort. He didn't lunge into the crowd to kill. He lunged to create space. He maintained that he was blinded by fear for Sabra's life, and that every strike of the blade was a desperate attempt to get the mob to back off his vehicle. It was a him or us scenario, a narrative designed to turn a predator into a protector. But the prosecution was ready to dismantle the fantasy, piece by piece. They started with the firefighter, Hannah. When she took the stand, the courtroom went silent. She didn't talk about a mob. She talked about a man who looked like he was on a mission. She described the vigorous nature of the stabs, not the frantic pokes of a scared man, but the heavy, intentional strikes of someone aiming for vital organs. She reminded the jury that Charlie Starner wasn't trampling anyone. He was standing by the door, likely trying to end the night, when Isaac's blade found his neck. Then, the prosecution brought in the digital evidence. They played the 911 calls from the scene, the raw, unfiltered terror of students who thought they were watching their friend die in the dirt. These weren't the voices of a mob. These were the voices of kids who were completely unprepared for the level of violence Isaac Pence had brought into their world. The most damning blow, however, came from the house of cards Isaac had built at home. The prosecution linked the violence on Sullivan Road to the conditions on Pickerington Road. They argued that a man who could leave his infant children to live in the stench of ammonia and waste was not a protector. They argued that the neglect at home mirrored the disregard for life in the driveway. Isaac wasn't a family man pushed to the brink. He was a man with a fundamental lack of empathy, a man whose only concern was his own rage. As the trial reached its climax, the focus shifted to the 2 knives. If Isaac was just poking someone to get away, why did he have 2 blades? Why did he feel the need to hide them at Justin Sloan's house before the police arrived? The prosecution hammered home the point. Innocent men don't hide the tools of their self-defense. Innocent men don't flee the scene of a poking and leave a man to bleed out in the dark. The trampled defense began to look like what it truly was: a desperate rewrite of a massacre. Isaac Pence had spent the night trying to be the strongest man in the room, but in the end, it was the voices of the witnesses he tried to silence that would carry the most weight. The jury didn't see a protector. They didn't see a man saving his fiancée from a mob. They saw a man who brought a knife to a shouting match and left a trail of broken lives from the Hocking Hills to Pickerington. The verdict wasn't just about what happened in that driveway. It was a final judgment on the character of a man who thought he could hide his darkness in the woods. The air in the Hocking County courtroom was heavy as the jury returned. For Isaac Pence, the class war and the trampled defense had been his last line of defense, a desperate attempt to recast a brutal stabbing as an act of chivalry. But the evidence, the 6 deep wounds, the hidden knives, and the haunting testimony of the firefighter, Hannah, had created a different picture. It was the picture of a man who brought a blade to a shouting match and chose to escalate a party dispute into a life-altering tragedy. When the judge read the verdict, the room held its breath. Isaac Pence was found guilty of felonious assault and attempted murder. The narrative of the victim was officially dismantled by the state of Ohio. At the sentencing hearing, the focus shifted from the chaos of Sullivan Road to the long-term wreckage Isaac left in his wake. The prosecution didn't just talk about Charlie Starner's physical scars. They talked about the psychological toll on 20 young witnesses who went to the woods for a birthday and came back with a lifetime of trauma. They highlighted the deplorable state of the Pickerington home, arguing that Isaac's disregard for his own children was the ultimate proof of his character. He wasn't a protector. He was a man who lived in the fumes of his own neglect and rage. The judge's words were sharp. He noted that in a moment where Isaac could have simply driven away, he chose to reach for a weapon. He chose to lunge. He chose to flee. Isaac Pence was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, ensuring that the outsider who brought violence to Sugar Grove would spend the next decade behind a different kind of wall. As for the victims, the scars remain. Charlie Starner survived the physical attack, a testament to the quick thinking of his friends and the firefighter who refused to let him go. But the peace of the Hocking Hills was permanently stained. The cabin on Sullivan Road stands as a reminder that in the dark, under the cover of the pines, the line between a celebration and a crime scene is thinner than anyone wants to believe. The case of Isaac Pence isn't just a story about a fight in a driveway. It's a story about the lies we tell ourselves to justify the shadows we carry, and the inevitable moment when those shadows are dragged into the light of a courtroom. Thank you for watching this episode of Silent Evidence, True Crime Exposed. If you found this story compelling, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Join us next time as we explore another chilling true crime case. Stay safe and take care.